Here we are, part 3 of the Whimsical Watercolor Mandalas. I have out one of my reference pieces. This is something I just created in a large sketchbook. It's fairly thin paper. I think it's only like 90 pound, and in my world that's very thin paper. It's a more for sketch things, more dry things work better for this. So light ink layers or pencils, pastels, that sort of thing. So these are just some of the ones that I practice with. You can see that one I didn't bother to finish, but I'm still going to sit it out so I have something to reference. And I told you I would show you some other sketch notes, mandala notes. Here's another one. I did it only in pencil, and I haven't erased the original guideline there in the middle. Here's a part that I started and abandoned because I didn't feel like finishing it, or I found something else more interesting, and that's just how it works sometimes. So I have those there because I find them interesting enough to reference and maybe get some ideas so that I keep going. So what I'm going to do here is do some filled in circles over top of those points. String of pearls is one name that kind of comes to mind for this one. So you can see this one, I drew over enough that it's about half filled in. I'll decide later if I feel like filling the whole thing in. For now, I'm just going to keep going with this part. I'm just going to pick up the pace a little bit here. So I'm just doing this because I'm picking it up so that it doesn't get quite so tedious watching. When you're actually drawing it, it feels very meditative, but when you're watching it, you might just feel like you want to see the next thing, teach me more. So I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit. You can always take it slower. The slower you draw, the more likely it is that you're going to get a more precise drawing, although sometimes you can end up overcorrecting and Might not matter so much in the end. So really the point is stay present with what you're doing. And you don't have to rush to any kind of endpoint either way. This is a curved line up and a curved line down. And this is a cold press watercolor paper. I haven't really specified in the materials list which one, because I use both, but more than often I use a cold press. And if I'm really concerned about creating smooth lines at the end with my mandalas, then I can always put a layer of paper over top of that collage layer, which we'll get to in the next project. But for now, don't really, it doesn't make too much of a difference with just some watercolor and this artist pen. So I can go back later and fill in details with that. I'm going to go ahead right now and move on to another circle. So I'm going to go for a longer, somewhat longer temple-like petal. One that's more curvy and a little shorter overall than some of our other elongated petals, but that's a little bit of a longer version, so it's not going to be quite as squat looking. But it isn't an even circle overall, so they're not going to be super consistent anyway. But when you look at the overall picture, it's going to be really fun and happy making. And you can see if I went right in between these and tried to make one right in between, it would be super squashed. So I'm going to go just right behind these two. And then I can even, because that line went over a little bit, I'm going to trace that again. And then voila! It all works out just as we meant to. And then I'm going to go on the outside of these always add to the outside or the inside of a design to make it more even with the rest. And again, never really stressing about it being perfect, as in, you know, machine made looking, because the human element in what we do is what adds so much charm and, you know, whimsical energy to it. I really wish that I had picked it up. There was a card, a gift card from Starbucks years ago, and it had these really scribbly, whimsical, wild, fun-looking mandalas, and I wish that I'd picked it up as an example, and I was thinking at the time, I'll get it next time. But then, of course, next time I was there, it wasn't there anymore, so you'll just have to take my word for it. Even big companies like Starbucks like to use these whimsical, fun designs as something to keep their customers happy. And then I'm just adding dots pretty much straight up and down here. A little bit of an angle with the pen. So it's another way to outline what you're doing. Anytime you outline your design, you extend it. So here we're filling in, repeating the design, but filling in. So we outlined or filled out, and now we're going to fill in. More or less following the lines before it. So I've essentially done circles of circles. The first row here on the outside of that main one, open circles, and then dots, which are concentrated circles. Again, repeating the open circles. So one of the reasons I keep coming back to emphasizing how your drawings, your mandalas don't have to be perfect or what are apparently perfect to be visually appealing is that I myself have gone through a lot of layers myself in letting go of the idea that what might appear to be perfect on the surface is really very limiting. Because if you stick to a narrow definition of what is pleasing or acceptable, then you're really missing out on so much. If you've ever watched a child play or explore art materials or just live in the world, if you let their imagination run, then they come up with some pretty spectacular things and just have a lot of joy and ultimately beauty to contribute to the world. And as Julia, the author of The Artist's Way, says, your inner artist is a child. So when you're accessing your inner child and allowing that part of you to create freely, without judgment, without censorship, you're going to come up with some really wonderful, creative, joyful expression. So my mission is more to connect to that inner artist, to that inner child, rather than a part that is overly critical, because there's just too much of that anyway. We get too many messages that say, you're not doing it right. So how about exploring a lot of ways to do things and appreciating the exploration in itself. And if you come up with something that you don't feel like hanging on the wall, so what? It's still all fodder for your overall journey in this artful expression. So we've reached 20 minutes again, and that's about the longest I want to make these videos. I'm going to stop here and probably do a time-lapse version on the rest of them. So you'll see how I do the other designs in fast forward kind of fashion, but you will still get the point and you'll see the end product and ask me any questions if you are curious about something. So have fun.